Hello everyone, my name is Valentina Zhukova and I'm going to talk today about constructions denoting degree of intensity in the Russian Constructicon. First, I will discuss what is viewed as constructions denoting degree of intensity. Then I will demonstrate the variety of intensifying meanings located in the various points of the intensity scale. Third, I will explain why we consider constructions of intensity parameters and how these constructions overlap with other semantic classes. Finally, I will distinguish two types of intensifying constructions, restricted to one semantic domain and not limited to one semantic domain. And now let's move on to the first part of this talk. As with other talks today, I will make my analysis based on data from the Russian Constructicon, and while talking about constructions, I regard them as form-function pairings at varying levels of abstraction and complexity according to the construction grammar approach. Semantic type degree of intensity emerged from the multidimensional semantic classification for the Russian Constructicon. It belongs to the class parameters, and this is the most numerous semantic type in the database. Altogether, there are 280 such constructions, comprising about 12% of all constructions in the database. This group can be classified according to more narrow meanings, syntax, and some structural properties, such as reduplication or the presence of negation markers. 280 constructions is not an exhaustive inventory of all constructions in Russian. However, they already form meaningful homogeneous classes based on narrow semantics and common syntactic and structural properties. That is why I'm going to analyze them. Well, now, intensification is a typologically universal concept that includes such meanings as little, few, all, much, many, very, and more. In the narrow understanding, intensifiers amplify the meaning of the word, and bring the meaning very or high degree to it. In its broad meaning, an intensifying marker not only refers to high degree of intensity, but rather indicates a point on an abstractly conceived intensity scale, and the point indicated may be relatively low or relatively high. In the Russian Constructicon, we apply this extended meaning to the semantic type degree of intensity. That is why it is not just intensity or high intensity. And in my talk, I will refer to an intensifier or an intensity construction in this extended meaning to investigate a wide range of intensifying constructions in Russian. And moving on to the range of intensifying constructions, let's proceed to the second part of my talk. Let's look at the constructions 1 to 6. The first prominent distinction lies between the constructions that scale upwards on a conceptual intensity scale and the ones that scale downwards from a contextually relevant norm. For example, он не на шутку разволновался scales upwards and intensifies their meaning, and он еле-еле дотянулся до телефона, he barely reached for the phone, scales downwards. If we draw a metaphorical intensity scale where up denotes high degree and large amount, and down denotes low degree that ends at a 0 point that denotes absence, it will look like this. Adopting the classification proposed for English degree adverbs by Quirk et al., we will call the first mentioned group amplifiers and the second one downtoners. Amplifiers are rather heterogeneous in their narrow meanings, which can vary from denoting a high degree of some quality. For example, прекрасный распрекрасный, he was very beautiful, strengthening the meaning of the verb, разругался в пух и прах, he had a terrible fight, indicating the large number of people or object, for example, толпа людей, a crowd of people, or large quantity of more abstract concepts, like свободного времени пруд-пруди, a lot of free time. It can refer to an ongoing action for a long time, like "Кот так и сидит на окне," the cat is still sitting on the window, or iteratively repeated action, such as "Он ударил еще и еще," he hit more and more. Downtoners have a lower end affect and can also express a set of meanings, like an attenuated action, еле ходит, he hardly walks, or quality, attenuated quality, слегка тяжелее, this suitcase is slightly heavier. They can indicate a small amount of something, like с фактами у нас пока не густо, we have very few facts. Or it can also show the total absence of the action or the object mentions, like я ничуть не обиделся, I'm not offended at all. In order to narrow down intensifying meanings, let's distinguish 6 semantic subtypes: maximizer, booster, approximator, diminisher, and 2 types of minimizers, low degree and absence, as you can see on the screen. Now I will briefly describe each of them. Just as rockets, boosters, give some extra power to an engine, boosters in a language give extra power to the words that they modify. Booster constructions denote a high degree or a high point on the scale. And the main distinction between boosters and maximizers is that boosters denote qualities that can potentially increase infinitely, while maximizers imply that there is a limit or a maximal point, and after reaching this point, scaling further is not possible. Booster constructions can roughly mean very or much, while maximizers usually mean absolutely or totally. The idea of total effectiveness of a participant in a situation is important for this group of constructions. As mentioned before, I adopted Quirk's et alia taxonomy for intensity meanings. While they divided downtoners into 4 subtypes: minimizers, diminishers, compromisers, and approximators, I will slightly modify them and adjust the system for Russian constructions in order to get a better image of the groups that they form. Firstly, minimizers for Russian are split into 2 separate groups. Ones that denote absence and ones that denote a very small extent. This difference is crucial for the appropriate use of these constructions, as well as for explaining them to non-native speakers. And given the fact that the Russian Constructicon is a pedagogical tool, such issues are relevant. So, semantic type minimizer absence emphasizes that the quality or action mentioned in the construction is totally absent or not available to any extent, like English, not at all. An additional point in favor of separating minimizers into 2 groups is the difference in polarity. For instance, as thoroughly described by Valentina, constructions from the type minimizer absence are characterized by an extensive use of negation markers that can only be omitted in limited contexts. While constructions of this group, while 88% of constructions in this group have negation markers, constructions denoting a small degree, semantic type minimizer low degree, do not have any negation markers in the anchor parts. Semantic type minimizer low degree denotes a very small degree of intensity or a quantity that is very small. These constructions do not deny that an action took place, but downgrade it by focusing attention on the fact that it was present only to a small extent. This small extent is considered to be a rather big deviation from the norm. Constructions of this type often have an additional component of meaning that indicates that doing an activity was hard, not necessarily physically, and supposedly took extra effort or energy. Well, if minimizers indicate a radical deviation from the norm, diminishers show rather slight deviation from a prototype. Diminishers also mean to a small extent or not fully, but they they are located higher on the scale than minimizers that mean 0 or practically 0. Minimizers of a low degree are mostly verbal constructions, while diminishers mostly modify qualities expressed by adjectives and adverbs. Approximators indicate that the word expresses more than is relevant. So a prototypical meaning of an approximator is almost. The difference between approximators and diminishers is that approximators imply that the truth value of the verb occupying a slot of such construction is denied. For instance, in construction «Мы почти приехали», we almost arrived, the speaker admits that they have not arrived at the place yet, without using explicit negation markers, but still uses the verb «приехали», arrived, because they focus the attention of the communication partner on the idea that they are getting very close. Therefore, two factors become important for the classification of intensifying meanings. First, the idea of limit and whether it was reached. And second, the idea of the norm and to what extent there is a deviation from the norm. Here, you can see the distribution of intensity constructions across subtypes. The vast majority of constructions belong to boosters and maximizers. About 76% of all constructions, in fact. You can also spot that the most of constructions occupy the polar parts of the scale rather than the middle. Now, moving on to the next part. Let's discuss why intensifiers can be considered parameters. They usually apply to and build over other semantic meanings, so that intensifying meaning can be applied to constructions from various semantic domains, like comparison, manner, measure, assessment, and so on. This semantic class stands out. That is why it is located vertically on this scheme. And here, you can see the visualization of semantic class parameters. It consists of two types, degree of intensity and degree of accuracy. Both types imply a certain scale that can move up and down. And they are similar in the part of showing an approximation to what is described. You can notice that maximizer, booster, and two types of minimizers are located vertically on one line, while approximator and diminisher are slightly to the left. That is why they are they describe two slightly different dimensions. Approximator and diminisher vary around the norm, while maximizer, booster, and minimizers refer to the extreme points on the scale. And as you can see, those extreme points are the most numerous. You can also see the dotted lines connected to several semantic types from other semantic classes. And it means that they are conceptually match some of the semantic types within the class, within degree of intensity. For example, universal quantifiers usually are tagged as maximizers, while attenuated prohibition usually is tagged as minimizer low degree, and non-existence in the class qualia is tagged as minimizer absence, as it denotes a total absence of something. And this is attached to the final part of this talk. You can see that constructions, intensifiers can be restricted to a certain semantic domain. For example, он выглядел не в пример приятнее, he looked much nicer. It is an intensifier that is only attached to comparison, while in intensifier не по дням, а по часам, ребенок растет не по дням, а по часам, the child grows very fast, is only attached to the semantic type measure time. However, some constructions within the type intensity can apply to several semantic types. As you can see, the example ужасно XP, which is a terribly XP, can be attached to several semantic types, such as assessment, ужасно скучное кино, a terribly boring film, or attitude, я ужасно боюсь высоты, I'm terribly scared of height. Also measure, у него ужасно много дел, he has terribly a lot to do. And volition, мне ужасно не хочется идти туда, I terribly, literally terribly, don't want to go there. And if you think of the construction ужасно XP, you will find it here in the green bar of parameters that are not limited to one overlapping class, while 262 constructions within the class parameter overlap with just one semantic class, so that they are restricted to one class. Coming to conclusions, we can see that a large number of intensifying constructions is distributed across a limited number of semantic subtypes. And usually intensifiers express high degree of intensity, while in 1/4 of the cases, they can describe low degree of intensity, and somewhere in between. The majority of intensifiers is located at the top extremes of the intensity scale, either high or low. And most intensifiers are actually semantically restricted and can only apply to a certain semantic type. That is why we have so many. And this means that intensity is a parameter that is applied to other semantic meanings. Thank you so much, and I welcome to your questions.